you don't have to spend decades to find success in sustainability.
The opportunity is where there is the biggest roadblock.
As soon as you understand this, then it makes everything slightly faster.
Today, I speak with 3 professionals who have turned ambition and resolve into prolific careers, and they're not even 40. Marianne Dutta is the founder of the Regenesis project, a trailblazing initiative that seeks to restore natural systems in the Philippines. Cristina Gómez leads the push for net zero, nature-positive cities at the World Economic Forum in Switzerland. And Giovanni Cossu is the head of sustainability at CapitaLand, one of Asia's largest diversified real estate groups headquartered in Singapore. In this episode, you'll learn what they did to jump ahead and beat the odds.
In order to accelerate your career, one of the first jobs must be related to a project or a company very driven by sustainability.
This opens a new door and opens a new door.
How staying flexible can unlock both opportunities and rewards.
My passion was the rainforest, but now I have the opportunity working with cities, sustainability-based manoeuvred.
And how to navigate the industry with your goals always in sight.
If you are giving off that energy, that is what actually changes minds. And the people who will gravitate towards you are the ones who you'd want to work with.
This video is sponsored by the Holcim Foundation for Sustainable Construction. More on them later. Marianne, Cristina, Giovanni, welcome to Ecogradia.
Hi, Nirmal. I'm so happy to be here.
Thanks for having us.
It's been less than 15 years since your first degree. None of you have crossed 40, but yet each of you has reached a position of influence in the sustainability space. Marianne, you are the founder and director of a nonprofit in the Philippines, the Regenesis project. Now, regenerative development is now discussed by mayors and planners in the Bohol region, largely because of you. Cristina, you are presently the lead for net zero, net positive cities at the World Economic Forum. You talk to mayors and urban planners around the world to show them how their cities might be transformed. Giovanni, you are the head of sustainability at CapitaLand Development, one of the largest real estate developers in Asia. You are producing a sustainability framework for a company that has a massive ecological footprint. I want to know, how on earth did you get here? How did you move so quickly to these epicenters of conversation? Marianne?
I think it sounds kind of paradoxical, but I think the reason why it was a short journey was because I left my profession. So I'm actually a licensed architect, but when I entered the practice, I quickly saw how shallow and superficial the practice of sustainability was. And I think the final nail on the coffin was when, early in my career, I was tasked to do this building and it was in its detailed development stage. And then I was told, all right, now let's figure out how to make it green, So I left. I came to Singapore looking for work. Then I ended up working for Singapore government, which was great because it allowed me the platform to develop national roadmaps and frameworks. And after a few years, I decided to come up with my own practice, which was the Regenesis project.
Cristina, how did you get here? World Economic Forum is a pretty big platform. How did you accelerate your movement towards this position?
Well, I don't think it was accelerated. My life has been, very fractal. I was born and raised in Colombia, fascinated about the biodiversity in Colombia. I studied anthropology because I really wanted to understand the causes and reasons why biodiversity and that magical world that I was admiring was so unknown and undervalued and unaccounted, not only in the urban society, but my friends, my family, and myself. And I think that in my career, there has been a lot of push factors in terms of wanting to change my life path, wanting to contribute, not only wanting to be important, because I don't think this has been my main drive, but wanting to be useful. And when I started to work in Colombia in the rural areas with both indigenous communities and rural communities, I felt that at some point, I was not useful anymore. This was a push factor for me to come and work and to study and work elsewhere and then come back with a sense of responsibility and be more useful.
Mm-hmm. Giovanni, how did you get here? Head of sustainability at CapitaLand.
Well, for me, Nirmal was, I would say, an intentionally planned this journey. Also because I come from a background of engineering. I studied building engineering in Milan at the Polytechnic of Milan. So from there, I have initiated this journey and then progressively built my expertise through key projects, certifications, and networks, and so on and so forth. So it was, I would say, like an intentional way of reaching sustainability where it is now. You arrived at the right time, at the right moment, that's luck. And in my career, for example, I was able to be exposed to some of the most sustainable buildings in Singapore. I was able to arrive in Singapore in a very specific moment in time where the discussion and the sustainability journey for the country was evolving into something deeper.
The challenge for many young people fresh out of university is finding a career path, right? And forging a career is just one part of what they want. They also want to do things that are purposeful and impactful. Tell me, after graduation, how did the world open up to you? What were the options that were available to you? Giovanni, let's start with you.
So I spent my first couple of years in Asia, in China specifically. So my experience in China was revealing, because it was a way of cleaning, I would say, your perspective of what it means, experiencing different cultural values, different sense of beauty, and so on and so forth. And after this, I had the opportunity of coming to Singapore. And Singapore, I would say, it was in definitely a different moment in its journey. What I appreciated very much in Singapore is it was the sense of resiliency and survival. This is something that I found in the country very deeply rooted, despite its young age, and something that I appreciated because it is indirectly also related to sustainability. It was this fact that Singapore had to live within a very small country with no resources, even from a water perspective. So how do you create resiliency in a country and start building a nation? So that this is something that brought me to come to Singapore and then to stay in Singapore for a long time. Every company, every country has to decarbonize, and the conversation became much richer. But the way in which these principles are translated in action is very different depending on where the country is in that specific moment in life. And this is very unique. You can only experience it fully if you live abroad, if you are in a country that is different from your hometown, and it was a perspective that I found very enriching because it allows you to also think long term of where the world is going and how these drivers of change in your in the countries where you are living are transforming also the conversation of sustainability. So that this was my experience of what I had seen in this journey.
Tell me, Cristina, when you left Colombia, what were you seeking? I mean, what exactly were you looking for?
Well, I was always trying to understand how comes we could live in a place with so much abundance of water, of species, of fruits and vegetables, soil richness, yet we were so disconnected with those values and always seeking something that was beyond our country limits. And again, an idea of progress and an idea of what's good that was not connected to the local heritage. And this was my main drive. And when I graduated from anthropology, I did have a career in biology, but never finished because I really wanted to go on the ground and really connect with what I was studying in a lab, right? And I had the chance to merge both worlds in a 2-year experience in the eastern plains of Colombia and also in the what we call the transitional forest, which is the transition between the Orinoco region, the eastern plains of Colombia, and the Amazon. I spent 2 years there, and that experience with indigenous taught me the importance of of knowledge and the culture of nurturing wisdom, and through knowledge to have very clear parameters of reciprocity, of what's good and what's wrong from a very nurtured self. So that sense of reciprocity also pushed me to seek a scholarship that took me to study in the UK. So you come with a responsibility. You go outside, you study in high quality schools, and you open your mind, as Giovanni was saying, to other ways of understanding resilience, conservation, rural development. And then you enlarge your criteria and your wisdom and your knowledge to be back and somehow be useful wherever it's possible and whenever it's possible. So that was my journey, but really pushed by this kind of feeling that there was something wrong in a country with so much abundance, but with so much violence and inequality and very complex situation that I think it's transversal to the countries that are resource rich. Right. So also, I haven't get to that point of being reciprocal necessarily, but I'm on it.
Marianne, you did go back. In fact, you are the Regenesis project is based in the Philippines, and you are very active in your home region. The things that you've learned in Singapore and the experiences that you've had, now you've used to construct a paradigm for where you're from.
And I think that it was that pivotal moment where I realized, like, you know what? Since I have a day job, I don't actually have to quit in order to start something. I could do it in parallel. And it was very funny because I decided to do this in the middle of a pandemic. We officially launched the Regenesis project. I was not there in Bohol. I had to do it all remotely. The whole thing took off while I was in Singapore, and my team, who is my family in the Philippines, and I was doing all that with my own company, not even knowing. No one is actually truly secure if you think about it. I mean, with all of these things going on, anyone could could lose their jobs at any moment. But the ability and the chance to be able to focus on and to work on your true passion now and find a way to make a living out of it, while you still have, another more stable source of income, I think that was the absolute correct decision for me. By the time it took for me to really start something, go big, go bold, start talking to governments, governors, mayors, and all of that, having that strong framework that I have spent like 10 years thinking, researching, and whatnot, put a lot of thought into it, researched a lot, using a lot of case studies, combined with my background experience on, national framework development. That was like the clincher. It almost didn't matter that no one heard about who I was. Like, I was completely, I left the industry. No one has heard of any firm by me or whatever. So even though I have lost 15 years of experience, I think taking that long detour paid off immensely.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I suspect you have all become sustainability leaders quickly by defining your own paths early, yes? But not necessarily on your own terms. I'm eager to hear how each of you negotiate your respective playing field today and how you balance work life and downtime in a world that seems to be, quite frankly, always on. But before we get into that, let's talk about some of the early day lessons that you think made the biggest impact in your careers. Marianne, what would you say has been the one key realization that opened your mind and set you on your way?
I think it would be to just unlearn everything I thought I knew.
Unlearn everything that you thought that you were taught in the university.
Yes.
That's a terrible indictment of the field of architecture.
It's not that. It's more like, you come into the profession and realize like, wow, it's just so unbelievably broken.
Right.
It's an inner brokenness of worldviews and understanding of nature, complete lack of ecological literacy. There's no fixing it unless we fix the root cause. So I had to be perfectly comfortable with accepting the fact that I don't know. I really don't know how to do it. And even though 10 years ago, I had this big, bold, humongous dream, which I was terrified of, by the way. I had no idea how to get there. And I look at myself like, who am I? What do I know? I don't have the skill sets. I don't have there's there's no path that I could follow. So it was very, very scary. But I think if we balance out the fear versus this kind of like excitement of discovery and curiosity, I think ultimately this excitement and curiosity will win out in the end, because all along I was scared about failure and what might people think and doing things wrong and falling flat on my face. And I just realized that that's just actually an artificial made up scenario in my head, and nobody actually really, really cares. So why not just pursue what I actually truly love and then have fun in the process and learn a lot in the process? And I think it's that kind of attitude of, like an upward energy vortex that I always try to keep myself on. I think that kind of attitude and character development was actually what got me here.
Right. Christina, what was the one thing that you did? Looking back now, that has got you where you are?
Of course, as an anthropologist, you become lost in the complexity, and you need to be pragmatic at some point. What are the key actions that can be done? And I think that my career has taught me that just deconstructing everything and questioning everything is not taking me to anywhere, right? And it's not enough just to be the observer and being in a diagnosis mode, but really after trying to understand that complexities and the system and the root causes, as Marianne was saying, is about being very chirurgical and finding very early victories, very concrete actions that can drive us into this systems change, focusing, of course, on the causes and not the symptoms. Once you get to know a new person, get to understand a new concept, this opens a new door and opens a new door and opens a new door. I never thought that I was going to study and work around urban topics. My passion was the very far away rainforest and serpents. But now I'm here sitting in Geneva working with cities. And I think that this is the magic of the interconnections and understanding how every piece depends on the other.
That's a really interesting perspective, Cristina, because what I get from what you've said is that sustainability is not a career choice, it's a life choice. And to a degree, it really is about having a systemic view of the world around you and seeing yourself embedded within these systems, right? And leveraging on these systems and the connections that these systems offer to go from one point to another. What you are talking about is a kind of a deep-rooted quest for reciprocity and systemic change, which doesn't bear the label sustainability necessarily, but it leads to that, right? Is that a fair summary?
And it comes with a lot of frustration. Every single day we're facing cognitive dissonance about being sustainable and being very unsustainable, right? And I think that being very blunt and honest about how difficult it has become to be coherent in the way we do, we act, we teach, we learn. It starts, I think, with humbleness, and it starts with just realizing that it's not an easy path, but maintaining the purpose, sustainability more as a purpose than as a career. I think.
Giovanni, I want to ask you if you were starting out today. How would you go about picking your first job, your first task? How would you construct this career path? What is the value of that first job or the first project?
I would say that in order to accelerate for your career, I think one of the first jobs must be related to a project or a company which is very driven by sustainability as its foundation, and then this means that you are able to experience that level of sophistication early in your career. That's, I think, is the most important part, because then you are able to communicate at a high level with different stakeholders around the table. And as soon as you understand this early in your career, then it makes everything later, I would say, slightly faster and also easier. Simply because you are looking at projects that may not be the norm now, but they may become the norm probably in 10 years from now. So you are trying to see how the future will look like in a relatively short to medium period of time. So you have to be very focused and selective on which priorities you have to take. And when I started my career, one of my mentors, Nirmal, and then I will tell you this, taught me a mantra that is still valid today, which is don't ask for permission, ask for forgiveness. So this was the mantra that I would say applies to many different jobs in sustainability, and that I've seen consistently as a winning formula across different jobs. So that's and even now, after 10 years, it's still valid.
Have you had Cristina, have you had the opportunity to work on something that in your career that begins to anticipate the future?
Well, clearly here, where I'm now, it's been it's been an incredible experience, very challenging. This is an emerging agenda. My agenda is called Beyond Net Zero, right? So I think that for me, the biggest challenge is to level up the agenda on nature, to really combine the climate decarbonization world with a very strong literacy around the role that nature and biodiversity plays in our life, the implications or the contributions of the healthy ecosystems to the urban economy, and more broadly to urban life. This has a strong connection with nature, right? So with me, this has been a challenge. This is, of course, we are a bit ahead of times because so far nature is not necessarily a priority. Nature is a nice to have. Nature in cities as a very kind of beautifying expression is not necessarily resolving the massive problem of biodiversity loss. So it's a small path in terms of reconnecting the urban life with a reciprocity towards nature. So it comes as a higher agenda and a wider agenda on the connections between urban metabolism and that very stable biodiversity that is outside cities' limits. So every single person, every single system, every single company depends on nature. Everything we touch comes from nature. So it's just a matter also of telling stories, being a very good storyteller. And I think that kind of soft approach towards sustainability is very important. And it's a luxury that some organizations allow the space for that, right?
Right. Marianne, I think you took a very entrepreneurial approach to this, which is you set up your own company and you identified a gap.
Yeah.
What do you think are the gaps today? If I was a young person graduating with my first degree, what are the gaps in the marketplace that I should be aware of that could give me my big opportunity for making a real difference, for having an impact?
Yeah. I think that's a really good question. I think the gaps, the opportunities are where there is a current challenge in the industry. So for example, when you are talking to any stakeholder, you're talking to the government, you're talking to developers or whatever. It's almost very paradoxical. Their reason for not wanting to pursue it is the opportunity. You know what I mean? So for example, if a developer doesn't want to go into regenerative development because they think that it's not as profitable as, doing the conventional way, then that is the opportunity. That is a gap that could perhaps become your own unique business model. Okay, so perhaps maybe I could create like a consultancy surrounding changing their mind, changing their worldview. And I think if we do that with every single roadblock, and the roadblock is usually a worldview or a mindset, maybe it's the government. The government is saying like, oh, we cannot do it because it will cost a lot of money. Then like, oh, okay. So then I'm going to create a model to prove that is wrong. That is actually not the case. So I think to answer your question, the opportunity is where there is the biggest roadblock, especially in terms of the conversations around sustainability and regeneration.
Coming up next, Cristina, Giovanni, and Marianne open up about the challenges that come with a career in sustainability.
You have an opportunity in a specific moment in time to drive sustainability in an industry which is evolving, despite all the problems and all the complexities.
I actually love that challenge. It's almost like playing chess. Everyone is driven by something, so you have to use that to your leverage.
They reveal how they juggle their professional and personal lives, how they cope with stress, safeguard their well-being, and keep their hopes up. But first, let me quickly tell you about the world's most significant competition for sustainable design with a total prize pool of $1 million, the Wholesome Foundation Awards. Francis Carey, the acclaimed architect, won the Global Gold in 2012. Prior to winning, few had heard of him, and since his profile has skyrocketed. At Ecogradia, we celebrate award winners like Carey. This year, we are spotlighting 2023 winners in an exclusive webinar series. And who knows, next year, you might well be a part of this inspiring group of changemakers. You can submit for the next cycle from 1st October 2024 until February 2025. It's free. Find out more in our show notes or at wholesomefoundation.org. And now, back to our conversation. Tell me how you approach the industry, the entrenched bureaucracies, the conflicting interests, all that political red tape, the undercurrent of fear. What makes you rush to work and push for change?
You don't rush to work because of fear, Nirmal. I mean, you rush to work because of passion. As I said, what makes my job interesting is really this: is the fact that you have an opportunity in a specific moment in time to drive sustainability in an industry which is evolving, and that's for me at least the biggest motivation to take this job, despite all the problems and all the complexities that can emerge, in implementing sustainability at this scale. But at the same time, despite the risk and, as I said, the problems that this may create, you also have opportunities that another platform may not give you, and I think it's a compromise between these two things. But the biggest motivation is really the value that I see in sustainability for the built environment, for a company of this scale and complexity.
Cristina?
I stay very, very, very connected with the purpose and very connected with knowledge as a means to communicate what's necessary, what's relevant. So I'm not very fond of having a very personal approach in work relationships. And although I'm very passionate, I also seek to be very respectful on how people behave and how people think, and their own reactions come with insecurities, with willingness to infuse power they have their own reasons, and I just try to be very pragmatic and deal with the content and deal with what is at stake. But I'm very, very focused on knowledge-based approach, on science, on evidence. I've been working on it all my life, and I do believe that it brings a lot of trust in conversations, in professional relationships, when you put knowledge and evidence at the very center, instead of just being very passionate and be driven with your passion.
What about you, Marianne? I mean, you deal with people in many disciplines, and they aren't always swayed by knowledge and science. Do you struggle with the job and personalities and egos? I mean, how do you cope with all of that in the course of a day?
I actually love that challenge. I think in the same way that you're trying to figure out what makes us tick, it's my job to figure out what makes that specific person tick. And there has been many times where, I would enter a meeting and then it's like we're practically fighting, or we're just, nothing is going through. We can't understand each other until such time that I realize oh, this is this person's perspective. Now I understand where he's coming from. And then I flip my entire conversation to be centered around that person's perspective. And then we walk away with a deal. So it's like that with everyone. I cannot even say like, oh, if you're going to talk to a person in government, it's going to be this way. If you're going to talk about a developer, it's going to be every single person is different. So what I would usually do, yes, I have a slide deck. I could change things at the very last minute. I may not use it at all. I may not even use the word sustainability or regeneration or Regenesis project. I don't need all of that. I just need to know what is my leverage based on that specific person. So sometimes it's just a matter of doing a little bit of a background check. There was one time I was scheduled to have a meeting with the mayor. I did not know what to expect, but then I just quickly had this conversation with his officer. And then I understood from him, like, so what is his aspirations? So from that very quick, conversation, I had a glimpse into his psychology. So when I entered into that meeting, I did not use my slides at all. I used that my understanding of that person's worldview and psyche. It's almost like playing chess, So long story short, I walked out of that meeting with a deal, with a project, and I was not a well-known architect. So I think the best answer is, you have to understand what makes each person tick. Everyone is driven by something and is also afraid of something. So you have to use that to your leverage.
So Giovanni, how do you deal with the headwinds of your job? You work in a very large organization with over 11,000 employees. I mean, how do you deal with the structure of your workplace and also the kind of ambitious targets that you've set up for yourself?
At least when I started this job, my approach was more technical and scientific. So it was driven by numbers and charts, etc. Then I realized that this is, again, a language that not many people understand. So I kind of pivoted towards a more personal approach. And this was more driven by the fact that there are different ways of making interpretations about sustainability. So I wanted to understand a little more, for example, what it means from a CFO implementing sustainability versus a CEO or a chief development officer. And that's the reason why I decided to take a personal perspective, not only for Singapore, but for the different countries where the company operates. So I've been traveling to China, to Vietnam, etc., to experience myself what the culture was there, and also to see firsthand and touch the buildings that the company was delivering. So this one, I found it much more impactful and much faster, I would say, even in the adoption, rather than an approach which was more scientific and technical. And I, as I continue in this journey in such a large organization, I felt that level of communication becomes even more powerful for staff. So for the larger group of people which are indirectly affected by the decisions that sustainability imposes on the company. So I would say that this was a kind of switch from more technical to something which is more personal.
Are you a natural optimist, Giovanni?
I couldn't do the job that I have with a negative mentality or a negative point of view. I think you have to be optimistic, otherwise it becomes very difficult to get things done, Nirmal, in this industry.
Listening to you, one would gather that driving change is beyond doubt one really tough business. I mean, not only does it require a deep-seated, unshakable commitment, but it also calls for flexibility and persistence in equal measures. And that begs another question. How on earth do you do it? I mean, mentally. Can I ask how you manage your work-life balance? I think this is a recurrent problem in many professions. It's challenging. Did you have to sacrifice anything? If so, how do you deal with it? Giovanni, you first.
What did I sacrifice? I like to be connected to my world most of the time. And this also includes the work that I do. So I don't split your life from your work in the same way that many other people do. And I like this because of the possibility of doing flexible working. So the fact that you can work at different times, also in different locations, comes also with the fact that you need to become available most of the time. I've always been working in that way, and I like this. The fact that also the sustainability is such a boiling topic at the moment. So the flow of information is so strong and so sometimes overwhelming that you need to be connected most of the time in order to keep the conversation going and in order to make sure that you have the latest information around this topic. So I don't see this as a sacrifice, Nirmala. I would say that this is more part of the job requirements at this moment in time, and the fact that the way in which I personally like to drive it. But the biggest sacrifice, I would say, is mostly the geographical distance and the fact that you may not have the luxury of being surrounded by your family most of the time. So that's something that for people entering this career in different countries probably to be considered carefully.
Mm-hmm. Cristina, in the pursuit of your passion, have you had to, scrounge and kind of struggle not with uncertainty, financial uncertainty?
Well, I'm very lucky, and I might say that no, sustainability pays my rent. So, but this means also that because sustainability is part of my professional life, but also my passion, I might be very honest and say that I completely fail in work-life balance. It's very challenging to just wrap up and close like your work environment and your working hours and then connect with whatever is out there in your life, because it's so porous. For me, it's just completely connected, and sometimes it's even mentally tiring as well because of what Giovanni was mentioning. There's so much information, so much fantastic things to read, to know about. There's a lot of push also around this agenda. It's something that is emerging, that is becoming very central. So I think that also just managing expectations, taking care of yourself, and also allow yourself to sometimes just stop absorbing and contemplating just the normal life. For me, it has been a challenge for sure. And perhaps the biggest challenge, it's not economical, because I had the very luxury to being offered this job after many years of having a very low wage job in the public sector in Colombia, not being able to save a lot of money, but very connected with my passion and being just, we say arras in Spanish, but now I have the opportunity for this to be part of my career and my kind of, and be comfortable somehow economically. But then the challenge is more personal, is mental, is allowing myself to lower a bit the ambitions. And I think that when you reach to a point that you can become somehow influential, this comes with a lot of also a sense of responsibility and perfectionism. And I think that we really need to embrace not being perfect. And I can also talk about my experiences because of not speaking English, not being my native language, and being a woman, and a lot of pressures and a lot of conditions that comes with a lot of responsibility and a lot of it's a challenge. It's a challenge for sure.
Marianne, have you had difficulty managing work-life balance? I mean, what have you had to sacrifice?
Honestly, I think work and life is more intertwined than we might think. So from the attitude perspective, I'm actually aspiring to be an essentialist, if you think about it, let's take a typical work day, list down all of the things that we need to do or we have to do or whatever. There could be 100 in your list. How many of them are actually truly impactful or important or essential? I would much rather work on three to five really important high impact things compared to 50, a lot of fluff here and there. I would much rather be streamlined and intentional with the things that I do with my day. The other thing to consider is that rest and recreation is a huge part of creativity. That's why I have a hard time separating the two, because I could be on the train and working in my head. I could be out in nature on a hike and working on my head. And I actually do that a lot, because you could be sitting for 8 hours on your computer and you're stuck and you think it looks like you're working because on your desk, but you're running out of creative juice. So what I would actually do is like, all right, I'm gonna go on a thinking walk. I would say to my husband, I'm gonna go out in nature, I'm gonna do a thinking walk, because there's so many times where inspiration would actually strike when I'm not on my desk. So once we make peace with the fact that that balance and that, more of like a holistic lifestyle and more intentional lifestyle is actually very, very necessary in this kind of work, then you will tend to embrace it. And you will tend to feel less guilty that, I actually took some time for myself. It's actually truly, truly necessary. Stress and anxiety is not a great breeding ground for creativity. That's what I realized, and that's also what I read. And that's also what I found to be true with myself. So I make sure that I have a lot of time dedicated to, going out to nature, going out to parks, doing other things. And that's the beauty of working for myself, because I have complete freedom to do that. I think that is something that money cannot buy. Yeah.
At the end, I'm always curious to learn from my guests what keeps their engines running, what the future looks like to them. What is it that gives you hope? Gio?
What gives me hope is probably the fact that the work that we are doing is now visible, and recognized globally. I would say that's what gives me hope, in the fact that there is a very fast-growing community of people that understand the efforts, and even in Singapore, coming together to kind of create a very strong network. So it's not only something which is a good to have, it's an obligation that is recognized by companies across different countries. That's something that gives us hope.
The only thing that will forever give me hope is the fact that the things that I choose to do, the actions that I choose to take, the attitude I have towards it, and my worldviews are completely 100% my control. What works for me is to have that dual combination of focusing of only what is within my control and then completely releasing all expectations of outcomes of what's going to happen after that. And then when we go out and then explain to stakeholders, they will feel that. And that is what actually changes minds. And that is actually quite, a very, very powerful force. This energy of working from extreme, it's almost like extreme optimism. What I mean to say is that I currently view all situations as inherently neutral, No matter what happens, if I get bad news or whatever, it's neutral. It is up to me whether if it's good news or bad news. Now, there's always a positive way to take it. Even if I face rejection, it's probably still always positive. So imagine if you are presenting yourself, giving off that energy, that positive optimism and strong conviction of what you're doing. People will tend to resonate towards that. And the people who will gravitate towards you are the ones who you'd want to work with. Probably they will even be the most influential people. And that is the kind of force that will change the world without even realizing it. It's just being completely 100% yourself and standing by what you believe in and taking complete ownership of your own internal worldview and the things that you do. Everything else is just an outcome of that. And I think as long as I have that attitude, I'll probably be fine no matter what happens.
Cristina.
What gives me hope is that we are all humans. We are driven by passions and fears, and I think that we all have somehow a sensible soul and a sensitive soul. And it also gives me hopes coming back to my country and listening to a diversity of birds and breathing pure air and eating papaya because I know that the earth is constantly pumping life and beauty and amazing flavors, and it doesn't stop. It doesn't stop. So I think that what gives me hope is all the time looking back, looking at nature, and whenever I feel eco-anxiety or whatever kind of anxiety that I said, it's not necessarily negative. I go back to nature. It's simple and it might be cheesy, but it is the hopefulest entity and dimension ever.
Thank you all. I really appreciate your time. I have greatly enjoyed our chat, and I really believe that the conversation we've had today is going to rub off on a lot of people who are listening, especially people who are young, who are coming out of school and who don't quite know what to do. I think you'll be an inspiration for them. So thanks very much. I hope to catch you soon in Singapore.
Thank you, Nirmal. It was a pleasure, and I hope that we can meet ideally in the Amazon, and if not in Singapore with all of you. We have so many things to share, and yeah, let this be just the beginning.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity.
Thanks, Nirmal. It was a pleasure and a very interesting conversation. Seeing different perspectives across this similar topic, it was quite refreshing, I would say.
Agreed. All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks very much for your time. Thanks also to you for joining in today. Let us know in the comments what was the one big lesson you benefited from early on in your career. Do share. We'd love to hear from you as well. And if you enjoyed the conversation and haven't done so yet, please subscribe to this channel and press the bell button on this page to always know first when a new video is out. You can also follow Ecogradia on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, on Instagram and other social media, and subscribe to our newsletter on our website at ecogradia.com. Until we meet next, this is Nirmal Krishnani signing off in Singapore.